Hi there folks, hope everyone's staying well during lockdown, during the pandemic. We're in a shielding household, so we're not basically allowed out of the household for 12 weeks because, as I've said in another video, I'm the wife's carer, so because of all the contact and close contact, that literally means I can't get out of the house either, so it's 12 weeks shielding for us. We're probably about halfway through that, assuming people stick to the lockdown. So today's video, I'm making a lentil cottage pie with potato and turnip topping. It's not difficult. I also make this using potato and parsnip. I sometimes make it with fresh mushrooms, I sometimes make it with dried mushrooms. You choose what you want. But today we'll walk you through how I've made it this way. So hope you enjoy, and again thanks for all the new subscribers, because it's exploded since my last video. Well, exploded, I'm in 40s or something like that. So not the millions that some have, but for me that's exploded. So on we go, let's get this on. Thank you. So then, first things first, we need to take and we need to measure out our lentils. As we're using dried lentils here, we're going to measure out 350 grams, put that into a sieve, and then we're going to take that and run that under cold water. The idea is to take that white dustiness that you see on the green lentils, to take that off of them under the water. If you're choosing to use canned lentils, then you're going to need 2 400-gram cans. And once we have them rinsed, we're going to stick them into a pot of boiling water and leave them boiling for 10 minutes. After your 10 minutes is up at a really good solid boil, we're going to take them down to a steady simmer and leave them simmering for another 15 minutes on the pan. So whilst the lentils are doing their thing, we can get on and weigh out our turnip and our potatoes. We're looking for about 750 grams of turnip, as you saw, and about 1 kilo of potatoes, again, as you see. So unless you're some form of masochist, you don't need to watch in real time me here cutting up, peeling and chopping a kilo of potatoes and 750 grams of turnip. So this is all getting done in high speed. Even at 20 times speed, this is still a very slow process. That's what happens when you're not a real chef, I guess. You can't do things super fast. But hey ho, it's a strangely satisfying process to sort of watch, but there's going to be a jump edit here because I've had enough. So if I've had enough, you've had enough. Now make sure when you are chopping them up that your turnips are at least half the size of your finished chopped potatoes, because the turnips are much denser than the potato, so they need to be smaller so that they all cook about even. Then once it's all chopped, put both the potato and the turnip aside and we can move on to the next part. So once your 15 minutes has passed, take your lentils, dump them into a colander and just leave them sitting there to let that moisture drain off and let them cool a little bit whilst we get on with the rest of what we're doing. So if, like me, you're a slow and steady worker, your lentils are ready, but we've still got to prepare the rest of the vegetables. So that's what we go on and do now. If you're a bit of a faster worker, you may be able to prepare these vegetables before your lentils are ready. So it's peel the carrots, chop the carrots, and then do the same with the onion. Again, we're not going to watch this in normal speed because that's just torturous. Let's get this all zipped through as fast as possible. Now with these big Cannonball onions, it's quite common when you cut them open, you see as you look there, you've got the brown bit inside where another skin has begun to form. Just peel that back slightly whilst it's still attached at the root. Pull out the bit that you don't want and then fold it back over, and you can cut it all together, just as long as you've still attached the root and only chopped off the top, which is the way you should be doing onions anyway, but it's just a wee tip to allow you to get that other bit out. Otherwise it's a bit of a faff if you chop it all up and then try to rescue the skin, or if you break it off it's a bit harder to cut the outside bit. So just as you see what I've done there, and I've just sliced off one layer because that was just a bit too thick and a bit too gnarly. Otherwise though, once we've taken care of that little issue, just chop your onions as normal. So do the cut as we see here, down towards the root without actually cutting past the bottom, and then just chopping all your onion off, and that's you get your lovely onions. And if you're like me, wear protective gloves. Too many times I've nearly tried to lose my finger. I do like my knife sharp by the way. So Big sharp knives, protect the glove, not chop finger off. Now, when it comes to the celery, I like to keep my celery sticks frozen and in the freezer. One stick to a bag, about 60 grams is a stick. And you just take the frozen celery and just put it straight on top and we'll cook it as is. You don't need to worry about defrosting it at all. But chop it up ahead of the time into the sort of size you're looking to use. Otherwise, if you're using fresh bought celery today, chop it up again to those sort of size of chunks. And now it's time to prepare our mushrooms. If we're using dried mushrooms, it's 45 to 50 grams. As you see here, my mix is 2 parts forrest, 1 part porcini. If I'm using the dried, otherwise it's chestnut mushrooms and it's 250 grams of chestnuts chopped up really finely because it's just nicer than the fine cut mushrooms throughout it. So not much smaller than the dried mushrooms here, or not much larger than the dried mushrooms here is what I really should say. To the dried mushrooms, we're going to add our 300 millilitres of vegetable stock, and if we're using fresh chestnut mushrooms rather than the dried, we're just going to set that aside the stock and we'll add that later on. So dried mushrooms, add the stock to them. Fresh mushrooms, don't add the stock. Again, just giving you both directions because we are in the middle of lockdown, so ingredients are a bit harder to come by, so use what you've got. And once the stock is added to the mushrooms, we're just going to set that aside for 5 minutes, cover it with a plate, and that will help them rehydrate just the way we need them. So whilst they are rehydrating, we're going to prepare 2 ramekins. One is going to hold 2 teaspoons of mixed herbs, half a teaspoon of black pepper, and 2 teaspoons of salt, 2 teaspoons of salt, and our second ramekin is just going to hold 1 teaspoon of salt and half a teaspoon of black pepper. That's because one of the ramekins goes in our vegetable mix and the other ramekin we'll be putting into our mash mix. So to save yourself on dishes, because let's face it, nobody likes doing the dishes, take your tablespoon of tomato puree and just dump that into the top of your can of chopped tomatoes. Generally, I've found there's just enough volume for that to sit on top nicely without causing any overspill. And next up, we're going to prepare our cheddar. We're looking for about 100 grams of a nice strong mature cheddar, and we're just going to grate that up coarsely. And for our final bit of prep work before we can actually get on and start cooking this bad boy, we're looking to get about 25 grams of a nice butter. So the first thing we do now is we get a pan of boiling water and add 1 teaspoon of salt, and once we've got that a good steady rolling boil, we're going to add both our potatoes and our turnips, or if it's parsnips you're using, our potatoes and parsnips into the pan. Now we're going to boil this for about 20 minutes, 18 to 20 minutes is where I find it normally sits, but you're going to check this when you're almost done by taking a fork and prodding your potatoes, and if they're soft enough the fork should slide right in. Just don't overcook it because you don't want your potatoes turning into a watery mush, so when the fork's going in easily but not when it's basically decimating it. Whilst waiting on your potato mash mixture to come to the boil, add 2 tablespoons of cooking oil to another large pan. I only have this huge big stock pot as my other large pan, so you don't need something quite as large as what I'm using, it's just what I've got. So we get this pan heated up as well whilst we're waiting on those coming to the boil, and just as the potatoes reach the full boil as we've got here, we can then take and add our vegetable mix to the other pan. So to the pan we add our carrots, our onion and our celery, and we're going to give that a really good mix once we've got it all in there, and just let that sweat away for 3-4 minutes. And once they have been sweating for 3 minutes, we're going to take and we're going to add everything else. So we're adding our lentils, we're adding our tomato puree, chopped tomatoes, mushroom stock, and the ramekin that contains our herbs and our salt and pepper. So that's your 2 teaspoons of herbs, your 2 teaspoons of salt, and your half teaspoon of black pepper, that one. We'll then leave that to cook for 15 minutes, and whilst that's cooking away, we'll get on and we'll get our potatoes off the boil, because as that's cooking away, the potatoes should come to be ready. So take another colander and let's get those potatoes off the heat and drain them, and then we're going to put them either back in the same pot and mash them by hand, or if you have a suitable machine, food processor or mixer, we're going to take the appropriate tool and we're going to mash them in there. So whilst they're mashing, we're going to also add our butter, our milk, which is 2 tablespoons of milk, and our other ramekin of salt, and get that mashed through it. All things going to plan, now that your potatoes are mashed or in the process of mashing, your vegetable mix should also be just about ready. So now we're going to just go and take and serve up over equal portions across our 2 casserole dishes, or whatever sort of oven dish you're using, equal amounts of our veg. Once the veg lentil mix is in the dishes and you've flattened that down with the back of your large spoon, take a dessert spoon or a soup spoon, take large dollops of your mash, and as you see me doing here, just place them on top of the veg mix. Once we have that fully placed across all the casserole dishes, we then take the back of that spoon and smooth it out just so we get a nice even layer of the potato turnip mash or the potato parsnip mash, whichever one it is you have used. And once we have our mash mix smoothed out, take your cheddar cheese and evenly sprinkle that across the top of the mash, and that way we're ready to then put this in the oven. If you're cooking with a fan oven at home, it's 190 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes. If it's not a fan oven, leave it in just slightly longer. Once that 20 minutes is over, bring this bad boy out and it's ready to eat. If you're not eating it right away, you can stick it away in the fridge after it's cooled down and reheat it. I generally reheat it for about an hour because everything will be cooled right down. Put some tin foil over it before reheating, and again at about the 210 degrees Celsius mark. So that's it, that's the pie made. I can't eat any in front of you just now because it's actually tomorrow night's dinner and the night after, because we're having something different tonight, but I just wanted to get this made and ready. So the cottage pie itself, you can keep it for a few days in the fridge, which we are doing, reheat it with a bit of tin foil on it for about 20-25 minutes, about 180. Or you can freeze it as is, or do as I do and break it up into portions and put it into basically takeaway containers, the stuff you get in the Chinese takeaway. Put a single portion in each, bung it in the freezer and bring it out when you want. I've literally had them in there for months at times. So that's it. So tomorrow night I'll do a wee quick taste bit as an addendum to this video, but otherwise that's it mate. See ya tomorrow or now.